back to simplicity, back to purity, less but better. That is the original quote from the legendary product designer, Dieter Rams. Now, why am I talking about a product designer on a podcast channel? Well, there might be more of a connection than you think. Today, we're going to look at the 10 principles of good design from Dieter Rams. So a quick history on Dieter Rams, if you're not aware who he is. He's a German industrial designer, most well known for his time as the head designer at Braun, the shaving company, from 1967 to 1997. And he's very well known in the product design space, and he revolutionized product design in a lot of ways. So we're going to take a look at his 10 principles of good design and see if we can't connect it to podcasting. So number 10, good design is innovative. In podcasting, that's kind of how podcasting started, was an innovative way to take a radio show from just the radio waves onto the internet. So we can always be searching out for new mediums to put our podcast out, new ways to engage with our audience, new ways to post to social media to get a wider audience. There's always all kinds of innovation that we can do inside of podcasting. And that's what makes it so exciting. Number 9, good design makes a product useful. Now, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much fancy editing we do or how much polish we put on a podcast episode. If the idea for the episode or the concept is not good, it's not helping the audience in a very specific way, then really, what's the point? At the end of the day, we want to make our podcast as useful for the audience as we possibly can. We're not making this show for ourselves. I mean, maybe a little bit, but in the end, we are making it for the audience. Number 8, good design is aesthetic. And this doesn't necessarily just mean visual. I think a lot of podcasters, most podcasters, don't even have video. I think this has a lot to do, in my mind, with the audio, how it sounds. You want it to sound smooth. You don't want your listener to be fatigued by the end. We all know what that listener fatigue is like when there's a harsh resonance throughout the episode, and by the end, you're almost tired. Make your podcast sound good, and if you do have video, make sure you put a little effort into the set as well. All right, number 7, good design makes a product understandable. And what I would say for this one is that you really want to have a simple core message. You want to spend a lot of time to really hammer down your core message. It should be, 1 to 2 sentences. You should be able to explain the conceit of the podcast really quickly and easily to someone who doesn't know what it is. It's really easy to get overcomplicated on the idea of a podcast, and that will lead to people clicking away and not focusing on your show because it's just that little bit too overcomplicated. So you really want to make your podcast as understandable at first glance, at first click as possible. All right, number 6, good design is unobtrusive. And for this one, I would just say, get out of your own way. Make it easy to listen to. Make your podcast easy to find for your exact audience. And by the way, I made another video on marketing strategies if you want to check that out to help with your marketing plan. And, at the end of the day, your podcast is a tool for your listener. You want to meet them where they are. You don't want them to have to come to you. Otherwise, they just won't. You might find some people that are willing to do that, but the majority of the people, if you want to grow your show, you have to meet them where they already are. Number 5, good design is honest. And this one's easy. Just be authentically yourself. Lean into your personality. People can usually tell if you're putting on a facade in some way, and they'll tune out because they don't have that connection with you. You want to connect with your audience. So just be authentically yourself and people will connect with you. All right, number 4, good design is long lasting. And this doesn't necessarily have to be evergreen content, although that will, make your podcast last longer in a sense that people can listen to it whenever they want. But it also can mean just make your podcast sound and look as good as possible, as universally good as possible. And that just comes down to caring about the quality of your audio and caring about how you look on camera, how your set looks on camera, and just try and make it as future-proof as possible. All right, number 3, good design is thorough down to the last detail. I can sum this one up in 3 words. Give a shit. Don't make your show an afterthought. Really account for all aspects of your show, from pre-production. Is the conceit of the podcast as a whole good? Does the concept for each episode make sense for your audience? Script writing, all the pre-production stuff that goes into a podcast. To production, what kind of mics you're using, what kind of cameras, does everything look and sound good? Make sure you're not grabbing the mic, all of that kind of stuff. To post-production, what does your post-production process look like? Are you making it sound and look as good as possible? Just make sure everything is accounted for each part of your podcast. It's obviously never going to be perfect, but just make sure that you're thinking about all of those little details. All right, number 2, good design is environmentally friendly. And I like to think of this as like sustainability. Can you sustain this type of workflow for the entirety of the podcast? Make sure you are scheduling things correctly. You're batching work when you can. Do you have the passion to carry this through in the long run? You don't want to get burned out or overly stressed about the process of creating this podcast. So just, make sure it's as sustainable as you possibly can for the long run. All right, and finally, number 1, good design is as little design as possible. And that brings us back to the original quote, less but better. And I like to think of this as just don't overcomplicate things. It's easy for an audience to get confused when they see a podcast that's it's all over the place. It's about too many things. We talked about audio fatigue with hearing before, but you might get audience fatigue if there's too many things going on. Generally, if you're overcomplicating things, you're making it more about yourself than you are the audience. You want the show to seem smart. You want to make sure that you know what you're talking about, that people know that you know what you're talking about, and really, it's not about you, it's about the audience. So you don't want to overthink the concept of the show, the concept of each episode. Just keep it as simple as possible. All right, there you have it. 10 principles of good design according to one of the best modern designers in the last century. And just as a summary, the 10 principles are: good design is innovative, good design makes a product useful, is aesthetic, makes a product understandable, is unobtrusive, is honest, is long-lasting, is thorough down to the last detail, is environmentally friendly, and is as little design as possible. All right, I hope that helps put things into perspective for your podcast. Like and subscribe. That really helps the channel grow. And if you have any, seemingly unrelated philosophies that you think can be connected to podcasting, let me know in the comments. I'll be very interested to see that. All right, that is it for today. I will see you in the next one.